It was a cold, bitter night in the Alaskan wilderness. The kind of night that doesn't forgive, where every breath of air cuts through you like a shard of glass. I remember the wind howling outside, pulling at the cabin with an intensity that made the walls creak. The storm had been raging for hours, but the worst part was the silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the deep, oppressive kind of quiet you only get when you're completely alone in the vastness of the wild. I had always prided myself on being a seasoned outdoorsman. When the opportunity to join a solo expedition came up, I didn't hesitate. Alaska was a place of beauty, but it also had a darkness, a raw, untamed edge that few dared to explore. They said I was crazy. I thought they were just scared. Now, as I sat huddled by the fire, listening to the wind outside and the occasional thud of something moving just beyond the reach of my camp's lights, I started to wonder if they weren't right. The team I'd been part of had already returned to the city, leaving me behind to finish some field research. I didn't mind the isolation. In fact, I preferred it. But that night, something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I chalked it up to the weather. Alaska had a way of playing tricks on your mind. Then the knock came. It wasn't the kind of knock you'd expect from a person. It was deliberate, slow, rhythmic. 3 knocks, each louder than the last. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, staring at the door. Who could it be? There was no one out here, not this far into the wilderness. I stood up, gripping the hunting knife at my side. The knock came again. I didn't respond. Silence. My breath hitched in my chest as I stared at the door. Every muscle in my body tensed. Suddenly, the sound of something scraping against the wood made me jump. It was like claws against the door. Something large, something with a purpose. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I slowly approached the door. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I had to know who or what was out there. I reached for the handle. That's when I heard it. A low growl. And then, the door slammed open. The door swung open with terrifying force, sending a gust of icy air into the cabin, swirling around me like the breath of something alive. I stumbled back, knife raised, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. My eyes tried to adjust to the darkness beyond, but all I saw was shadow, a silhouette, towering and unnatural. It was a creature, but not like any animal I had ever seen in Alaska. The massive figure stood in the doorway, its eyes glowing faintly, reflecting the dim light from the cabin. It wasn't human, but it wasn't a bear or a wolf either. The shape was too wrong, too twisted. A hunched body, claws that looked like they belonged to a predatory bird, and a face that I could barely make out but felt burned into my mind. I was rooted to the spot, my breath shallow, too terrified to move or even scream. The thing didn't make a sound. It just stood there, staring into the cabin, its gaze never leaving me. There was no reason for it to be there, and yet it was. I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating. Then it moved. The creature lunged forward with an unnatural speed, its claws scraping the wood as it darted toward me. And that's when I finally managed to break free of my paralysis. I swung the knife blindly at the figure, but it dodged with terrifying ease. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest that it felt like it would explode. I backed up, stumbling over a chair as I tried to put distance between myself and the monster. There was no time to think, only to survive. The fire flickered weakly in the corner of the room, casting long, distorted shadows that danced around the beast as it circled me, growling low in its throat. I knew I had to find a way out, but the only exit was through that door, through the thing that stood just beyond. I thought of the windows, but the snowstorm outside made it impossible to see, let alone escape through them. The storm had trapped me here, and now something else was trying to do the same. I swung again, this time with more intent, slashing at the creature's arm as it came in close. The blade sank into something, but it didn't scream, didn't react as I expected. Instead, it just looked down at me with those glowing eyes, a horrible, knowing smile stretching across its face. It wasn't a creature of flesh and blood. It was something older, something more dangerous, and it wanted me. The knife seemed useless against the creature. Its skin was unnaturally tough, like it had been forged from some otherworldly material. I swung wildly again, but it easily avoided the strike, its movements so fluid and quick they blurred in the dim light. Panic surged in my chest. I was no match for it. The thing was hunting me, and I had no idea why. My breath was coming in ragged gasps as I tried to back away, looking for anything that could help. The fire was dying, just embers now, barely offering enough light to see. My heart thudded in my ears. I had to get out. I had to survive. And then, a voice. It came from behind me, low and sibilant. A whisper that crawled under my skin like insects. "Don't run." I froze, my spine straightening as the words echoed in my mind. The voice was haunting, almost familiar, but I couldn't place it. It was cold, alien, like it came from deep beneath the earth itself. I turned, expecting the creature to be right on top of me. But instead, I saw something else. It was a figure, standing in the corner of the cabin, shrouded in shadow. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and calculating. There was no escape. The creature in the doorway and the figure in the shadows were closing in. "You don't belong here," the voice continued, more insistent now. "You shouldn't have come." I shook my head, trying to block out the whispers, but they only grew louder, surrounding me from all directions. It felt as though the walls themselves were closing in, the air growing thicker, suffocating. I gasped for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. The figure in the corner stepped forward, revealing its face, or rather what was left of it. A mask of decayed skin stretched tight over something inhuman beneath, its eyes hollow and black, voids that sucked in all the light. A cold wind swept through the room as it stepped closer. "You're not alone," it hissed, as if it had always been here, watching me. This place is ours." The creature in the doorway roared in response, its voice an unnatural mix of animal growls and guttural human speech. The two figures, the one in the doorway and the one in the corner, seemed to communicate, a strange, silent understanding passing between them. I could feel the weight of their gaze on me, like I was being judged, or worse, hunted for sport. The whispers didn't stop. They came faster now, words that didn't make sense but were wrapped in a language so ancient, so twisted. I could feel my sanity slipping away with each syllable. I wanted to scream, but the words were caught in my throat. And then, as if the storm outside had given it permission, the wind howled louder than ever before, rattling the windows and shaking the cabin to its core. The fire sputtered out entirely, leaving me in total darkness. I was blind. I could only hear the whispers and the growls. I could feel them moving closer, closing in on me. My skin prickled with dread, and then nothing. Silence. And then a hand touched my shoulder. The touch was ice cold, freezing, as if it had been submerged in the snow for hours, maybe longer. My body went rigid, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up as if they were trying to flee from the touch that now gripped my shoulder. I wanted to scream, to rip away from it, but my muscles felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. I don't know how long I stood there, caught in that frozen moment of terror. The darkness around me seemed to press in from all sides, suffocating me, while the growls and whispers grew louder, closer. I could feel the breath of something hot and rancid at my neck, but I dared not turn. I couldn't bring myself to look at whatever it was. The hand tightened on my shoulder, and then the voice returned, closer now, right in my ear. "You've been chosen." The words sent a wave of nausea through me, but it wasn't just fear that made my stomach turn. There was something wrong about the voice. It wasn't the same voice I had heard earlier, the one in the corner of the cabin. This one was deeper, almost guttural, like something buried in the earth for centuries. Without warning, the hand spun me around. I came face to face with a figure that made my blood freeze in my veins. It wasn't the same creature from the doorway, but something worse, something far more ancient, more twisted. It was humanoid, but its features were contorted, stretched in unnatural ways. as if its body had been mangled and reshaped by forces beyond comprehension. Its face was gaunt, the skin stretched tight over its skull, lips drawn back to reveal teeth that were sharp and yellowed, like those of a predator. Its eyes. No, they weren't eyes at all, but hollow pits of darkness, deep and endless. They seemed to pull at me, dragging me into their void. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. I tried to fight, to push it away, but my body was like stone, unable to move, unable to escape. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered again, its voice a rasping hiss that echoed in my mind. "This is our land, our hunting ground." I felt the pressure on my shoulder tighten, and suddenly, I was yanked forward, into the creature's grasp. A burst of cold shot through my veins as it dragged me toward the door. I couldn't fight back, couldn't even raise my arms to defend myself. It was like I had been drained of all strength, all will. I was almost out the door when I finally managed to break free of the creature's grip, stumbling back and gasping for breath. The storm outside had reached a fever pitch, the snow blinding, the wind howling like a maddened beast. I knew there was no way I could survive out there. Not in the storm, not with whatever this thing was stalking me. But I had no choice. I turned, making a dash for the far corner of the cabin where I knew there was a small trapdoor leading to the cellar. It was a long shot, but it was my only chance. I grabbed the edge of the door, wrenched it open, and jumped down into the blackness below. The cold hit me like a slap in the face, the air thick with dampness and the smell of old earth. I stumbled into the darkness, breathing heavily, desperately trying to stay quiet. But then, I heard it, the sound of something moving above me, pacing the cabin floor. The growls were softer now, but they still echoed down into the cellar. I wasn't alone, and that's when I saw it. A dim, flickering light from a lantern hung on the wall of the cellar, casting long, ominous shadows. I turned to find the source, my heart racing in my chest. It was then I noticed something else. A trail of deep, dark marks on the stone floor, leading into the far corner of the cellar. And then, I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from above. "You can't hide from us." The whisper sent a chill so deep through me that I could feel my bones trembling. I knew that voice. I knew it wasn't just the wind or my imagination playing tricks on me. It was something that had been here, lurking in the shadows long before I had arrived. The fear, the dread, it felt older than me, older than anyone, like it had been waiting for centuries. I took a slow, shallow breath, my eyes scanning the darkness of the cellar. The flickering lantern light didn't reach far enough to reveal much, but the trail of dark marks on the stone floor drew me in, pulling my gaze toward the corner of the room. Something about the marks felt wrong. They weren't natural. It wasn't blood. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. The pattern was strange, almost like symbols old and worn, etched deep into the ground. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape, but something in me, something primal, told me to follow the trail, to understand what it was that had been left behind. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. Each step felt like a weight pressing down on me, the air thick with something that wasn't quite right. The further I moved into the cellar, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The silence around me grew louder, as if the very walls were listening, waiting. The marks led me to a large, circular stone, half buried beneath the earth. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a weathered rock, but as I got closer, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. A deep, gaping hole carved into the center. It wasn't natural. It was man-made, and the shape was unmistakable. It looked like a door, portal. I crouched down, my heart racing, and reached into the dark void with trembling hands. The moment my fingers touched the stone, I felt it. An electric pulse, a surge of cold energy that ran through my arm and into my chest. I gasped, pulling my hand back, but it was too late. The stone had already begun to shift. With a grinding, bone-chilling noise, the stone door slowly slid open, revealing a hidden space beneath it. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. There, in the depths of the cellar, was a tunnel, a long, narrow passage that seemed to stretch deep into the earth. And that's when I heard it again, the whisper, "Come." It wasn't a request. It was a command. A surge of terror flooded through me. The words weren't just meant for me. They were meant for anyone who had ever set foot on this land. This was their place. The creatures, the shadows, the ones who had been waiting for centuries to call someone into the darkness. I turned to run, but before I could take a single step, the cellar door slammed shut, locking me in with no way out. The creature in the doorway was back, and it was closer now, so close I could feel its breath on my skin. Its glowing eyes burned through the darkness, and it grinned, sharp, yellow teeth flashing in the faint light. "It's too late," the creature growled, the voice vibrating in my chest. "You are ours now." I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. I had no more fight left in me, no more strength. I could feel the darkness closing in, the weight of the past, the weight of the land itself, pressing down on me. The whispers came again, louder now, more urgent, swirling around me in a language I couldn't understand. It was a cacophony, a chorus of voices from all directions, each one pulling me deeper into the abyss. I was trapped. There was no escape. And then I understood. The marks, the whispers, the creatures. They weren't just haunting this place. They were this place. The land itself was cursed, a forgotten graveyard where ancient horrors had been buried long ago, waiting for someone foolish enough to unearth them. They had lured me here, led me to the cellar, to the stone door, to my doom. And just before the darkness swallowed me whole, I heard a final whisper. This time it was different. It was clear. It was personal. "We'll never let you leave." I can't explain how long I was trapped there. Time didn't exist anymore. There was only the dark. Only the whispers. The creature in the doorway stepped closer, its form now fully revealed in the dim light that flickered from the lantern. Its grotesque body seemed to shift, as if it were made of shadows and bone, a disturbing distortion of what should have been human. The others, those figures that had been watching me from the corners, emerged from the darkness, each one more grotesque than the last, their hollow eyes burning with ancient malice. They circled me, their growls like the hum of a twisted lullaby. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but there was nothing left. Nothing but the crushing weight of terror. "You should never have come," the leader said, its voice low, like the rumble of thunder far off in the distance. Its words felt like an echo, a warning that had been spoken long before I arrived here, before I set foot on this cursed land. They had been waiting, not for me, but for anyone. Someone to open the door, to awaken them from their slumber. I was a fool, a trespasser. I turned, desperate to find any escape, but the tunnel I had discovered was now nothing more than a dark maw, swallowing the light from above, drawing me in with an irresistible pull. The door had closed behind me, and there was no way out. The leader reached out with a long, gnarled hand, fingers extending like claws, and its cold touch clamped around my arm. I tried to pull away, but it was no use. The grip was like iron, impossible to break. The other creatures closed in, and I realized with a sickening jolt that they were no longer just watching. They were coming for me. "You will join us," the leader whispered, its voice full of dark promises. "You will never leave." As I struggled against its grip, a flash of memory hit me. A moment from earlier, when I had first entered this cabin. I remembered the legends, the old stories told by the locals about disappearances, about the curse of the Alaskan wilderness. People who wandered too deep, who heard the whispers, who never returned. I had thought they were just stories, but now, standing in the dark with the creatures closing in, I knew the truth. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. They had claimed so many before me, and they would claim countless more. "Please," I whispered, the word barely escaping my lips. But it was too late. The leader smiled, its face a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its teeth glinted in the dark, sharp and jagged, a reminder of the monstrous power it held. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, just as the weight of my impending doom began to settle into my bones, the whispers stopped. The creatures froze, their eyes locked on something behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I knew instinctively that the moment I did, I would be lost forever. A voice, not like any I had heard before, rippled through the cellar, low and commanding. "Leave him." The creatures recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. Their faces twisted in confusion, and then fear. They began to move back, as though the voice itself had terrified them. Couldn't believe it. I didn't know who or what was speaking, but it was the only thing that had given me even a shred of hope. "You don't belong here," the voice continued. "This is not your time." The creatures hissed, but their forms began to waver, flickering like shadows cast by a flame. They seemed to dissolve, their solid bodies no longer as tangible. It was as though they were being forced back into the void they had come from. I took a trembling step back, my heart still racing in my chest, not fully understanding what was happening. The creatures were gone. The oppressive weight lifted, but the air was thick with unease. The cellar door creaked open with a low groan. The storm outside had stopped. The wind was still. I didn't wait. I ran. I ran up the stairs, through the cabin, and out into the frigid night air. The land was silent. There was no sign of the creatures, no sign of the curse. Just the storm that had finally passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't safe. Not really. They would come for me. The land would call me back. It always did. And they would never stop.